So this correct score bot was developed off a correct score scanner I made back in 2018. But at the time when I made it, I didn't realise how significant this bot was and how important it was going to be for me going forward in the future. So at the time I was told by numerous people that it was virtually impossible to be able to correctly identify the actual score. So with me being totally stubborn, I decided to prove them wrong. So the original scanner took a considerable amount of time and effort, probably over a week, as I had to study the market, the correct score market, and develop my own pattern to identify the score and come up with a conclusion that I had to use a kind of binary system where it's a series of ones and zeros to identify what scores have gone and what scores are still possible. By using the process of elimination, I could then identify what the score was at any given point during the game. When I'm creating custom automation for people, I'd say that this particular system is used on 50% of the automation that I create. So I think it's time that I publicly shared this on the forum, and hopefully it will help a lot of people with their automation in the future. So let's have a quick look at how this bot's put together. Initially we can see we've got the correct scores at the time, so we've got 0-0, 1-0, 0-1, 1-1, all the way down to any other score. Obviously the only barrier to this, because we're checking the correct score market, is the 3-3 scoreline, because anything after that becomes the any other scores. But below this there is a series of signals that fires on each individual scoreline. I make each scoreline check to see if the weight of money is greater than 99%, 100% on that particular selection. If the weight of money is over 99%, what that means is that scoreline has gone, because there is no more money waiting on one side of the book. It means that scoreline has passed and it's no longer possible. So that is then set with a signal. So we've got the 0-0 signal, and it's set with a value of 1, and the 0-1, 0-2, 0-3. In this instance we are looking at the half-time market, so we're waiting for the 53rd minute till the 55th minute, and then what that's going to do is going to check every single scoreline, and then depending on which one comes back with a positive value or a negative value, we can then determine what score has passed, what score is possible, which future scores are possible, and by that we can use process of elimination to identify the actual score. So if we take the scoreline 0-0 for example, what that's going to do is it's going to check the three scorelines. It's going to check 0-0, 1-0 and 0-1. Now remember, if the weight of money is greater than 99%, it will be set with a value. So if we are to identify that the current score is 0-0, the signal 0-0 for the market is not set with a value, which means the weight of money is less than 99% for 1-0 and 0-1 as well. But if we look at the 1-0 market, we can see that 0-0 is set with a value and 0-1 is also set with a value. 1-0 is not set with a value, which means the scoreline is possible. 1-1 and 2-0 is also possible. And the same process for all the other scorelines. Or the more goals that are scored, the more checks that this bot needs to complete in order to identify the correct score. This isn't just restricted to half time, this can be placed throughout any point during the game. For obvious reasons, half time is always the safest place, because the markets are totally stable, there can't be a goal, there can't be any suspensions while your check is in progress. But this can be changed to constantly scan for the correct score after every single suspension. We can then use these score lines to send out a stored value to the current market, so you can lay the current score, or you can have it send out a stored value to the event, which means you can share the score information with any market within that particular event. So as you can see, there are currently 10 matches all at half time, and I have added them to a watch list in Flash Scores, and on the watch list on the right hand side you can see that every single score has been identified correctly. Booyah! So let's have a quick look at how we can adjust this bot to communicate with other markets. So I've just made a very quick edit to this bot, and what it's going to do, it's going to lay the 0-0 half-time score, and it's going to back if the score is 1-0 and back if it's 0-1. Now if you look, every single scoreline has a signal for the market. So if its scoreline identifies it's 0-0, it's going to set a signal for score 0-0, 1-0, etc, etc. So what we're going to do, we're going to use this to lay the 0-0 or back the 0-1, 1-0. Now what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that the market's in play. The signal score 0-0 for the market is set with a value, and we're going to place a lay bet. So instead of it sending out an alert, we are just going to have it place a lay bet in the market for the fixed amount of £10 at the second best market price. And we're going to do the same with the back 1-0 and the back 0-1. As you can see, we've changed it in the rows. And again, the score 1-0 for the market has got to be set with a value, and the score 0-1 has got to be set with a value. And it's as simple as that. You could go one further, and what you could do on score 0-0, say for instance you wanted to set a stored value. So if we select store the value, and store the value name is score 0-0, we are going to then share this with the event. And we're just going to set this with an entered amount of 1. So if it's identified that the score is 0-0, it's going to send out a stored value for the particular event to say that the score is 0-0. Now all we have to do is go to your receiving market, whether that be the match odds market, the overs unders market, to receive the signal that it's actually 0-0, 1-0, or whatever the score that you're looking for may be. So it might be the fact that you're not actually looking for the particular scoreline, but a certain amount of goals. So if we come over to the score 1-0 and 0-1, if we select store the value, instead of going score 0-0, we could go 1 goal for the event is set with an entered amount of 1, and we can apply that. The same with the 0-1 score. So it doesn't matter if it's 0-1 or 1-0, we're going to set 1 goal as a signal. Now then, if we head over to, let's say, your match odds market, all you want to know is if there is 1 goal in that market. So what we would do, we would open a stored value condition, and what we would do, a stored value, the name, 1 goal for the event, because we're sharing it with the event, is greater than an entered amount of 0, because we know if 1-0 or 0-1 is set, then that value then becomes 1. So what we've done for this stored value is said if the stored value named 1 goal is greater than 0, 0 being the current state of where nothing has happened, it will then be given a value of 1. We then know on the receiving markets that that's a green light to place your bet. So let's have a look at this bot in action. So Leicester and Chelsea are currently 0-0 at half time. So the lay bet on 0-0 has currently fired. Now this is the same for the AC Milan and Roma game. It's currently 0-0 at half time, so the lay bet on 0-0 has triggered. But Watford are currently losing at home to Southampton, so the back bet on the 0-1 also fires. The first thing we need to do is make sure that we have the watch list open and ready. So what we'll do is we will apply this rule to all the markets, and then if we come over to the watch tab, and then we can either sync with list on markets, but say for instance you just wanted a handful of games, we could add the selected markets to the watch list and then display the selected watch list. Now if you maximise or drag across to the right, the scores will be highlighted in this column, but they're not on by default. To turn this alert on, you have to go to display and then highlight the alerts, otherwise it would just be like that. So if we highlight the alerts, then the score line will pop up on the right hand side. You can then pin this to the side on another screen, or whatever you want to do with it. This bot is available to download on the BetAngel forum. If you are struggling with automation or just don't have the time to learn, I am currently providing a custom automation service. You can contact me on Twitter at LeeCalTrading or email me direct at lee.cal@outlook.com.